Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest iteration of Weather Center Nazario. Today is December 29th, 2023. We are right on the cusp of rolling into 2024. Forgive me for being away from the YouTube sphere, guys. I have not forgotten about you, and I've been thinking very well about every single one of you as we've rolled through the holiday season, and I thank you graciously for those of you tuning in today for this Weather Center segment. We don't have too much happening in the weather sphere today, but as we move into early 2024, particularly the end of first week of January into the middle portions of the month, it looks like 2024 is going to be off with a bang. Which truthfully, guys, has me thinking as we get closer and closer to the new year, is this a sign of what's to come for 2024? Not only for our El Nino winter into spring, but for the tropical season of 2024. Please like and share this video if you like what you see, guys. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and turn your notifications on so you do not miss a new update as we roll into this potentially robust 2024. So we're getting started on tropical tidbits. We're looking at a wide shot of the United States, central and the northern periphery of South America to include the west central Atlantic, the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and the eastern Pacific. And we do have a pretty active pattern out there despite the lack of significant weather activity over the lower 48. You can see down over the Caribbean, for that matter, we have a very strong subtropical jet axis surging out of the eastern Pacific, providing a lot of good moisture and thunderstorm activity for Central America, especially into Belize, now moving over Costa Rica, Nicaragua, some portions of Honduras that are also seeing some good firing up of thunderstorm activity, continuing to rapidly accelerate off to the northeast. This did bring us quite a bit of rainfall yesterday morning in the Bahamas and the Central Florida Peninsula. I know we woke up here in our neighborhood listening to the pitter-patter of rain as I was off to the gym at around 6:30 in the morning. Luckily for some of you guys, I know you had plans out and about in the Central Florida area, and the rain cleared out just in time to enjoy them. Moving right along, if you don't follow me on TikTok, I highly encourage you to do so. WXCenter_Nazario. We've been doing a lot of discussion about this cold pocket, this upper level low that's still slowly trudging. It's dragging its heels through Kentucky, Tennessee, moving into the mid-Atlantic region as we speak, centered somewhere right in through here with ample snowfall wrapped up in its vortex. Where you see those blue shades, I'll clear the ink out of the way. That is where our snow is currently falling, even though it doesn't look like anything extreme on the infrared shot right here because of those cold colors in the cloud tops and it being very shallow to the low levels of the environment. That is where we're seeing some dusting of snowfall, some light flurries, making it all the way as far south as northern Alabama and Georgia over the higher terrain features. Now out west, you can see we have a very, very intense system that's working its way towards the Pacific Northwest and Western California. As a matter of fact, the Bay Area has been seeing very, very tremendous onshore flow, very strong winds in excess of 40, 50 miles an hour, pushing water inland near the San Francisco Bay Area. We've had some good coastal flooding going on over there, and I've been watching a lot of news reports coming out of that general area mentioning the coastal flooding, inland inundation, and lots of rainfall activity that's helping to just make matters worse. As we go through this video, that is going to be the song and dance for at least the next 2 to 3 weeks. That's essentially the key takeaway. I'd rather you not click away from this video, but if you pull anything from this segment, guys, that's essentially what we're going to be looking at. I couldn't do this on my TikTok page, but I'm going to do it now with my Epic Pen. Essentially, what we are looking at over the next 2 weeks, give or take, we're going to have these cutoff entities, these very good low-pressure systems, move their way into the west coast, and from there, they're going to follow a path very reminiscent to this over the next 2 weeks with a very, very intense cold plunge expected to finally make its way out of Western Canada. We'll look at that here in a moment. But the key takeaway again, guys, is we're going to see low pressure after low pressure after low pressure, not kidding, a freight train style effect coming through the desert southwest, moving through the southern plains, and then eventually affecting us here in Florida and the rest of the southeastern United States, potentially making their way up the eastern seaboard into their next nor'easter setup. Just like you can kind of see on the infrared right now, we have that low pressure barocclinic system racing off towards the eastern Canadian provinces, making its way through Newfoundland, the eastern tip of Canada, headed towards Greenland at this point. All right, let's get into this. What we're looking at here, I know this is a very psychedelic looking chart with a lot of lines, a lot of numbers, and a lot of different shades of color on here. This is going to be our 1,000 to 500 thickness, and the reason we're using thickness in this case is because it does a very great job of literally identifying the thickness of the atmosphere if you were to look at it horizontally from the surface all the way up to the tropopause. And where you see those shades of green moving into blue, that is where we have a bit more of what we would consider a shallow atmosphere. The thickness is a lot lower than if you go down towards the south south towards the Caribbean, where we have those shades of brown, darker browns, and then the darker reds moving into the oranges. That's where your thickness lines or your thickness contours are higher, indicating warmer air. Just as we mentioned on the channel before, guys, when you think about thickness, think of it like the plastics in your vehicle or the way plastic or rubber reacts to temperature. In the heat, typically what happens, air tends to expand, rubbers and plastics tend to expand a little bit, and when it's cold out, they tend to shrink up a little bit, and that's exactly the same concept here. So taking away all the fancy jargon, where you have lower thicknesses, we typically have much colder air. Where you have higher or greater thickness values, that's where you're going to have your warmer air. And right out of the gate, you can see that we have a 528 thickness line nestled in over the Appalachians, the Mid-Atlantic region, slowly trying to make its way off the east coast of the United States. This is going to be our cold pocket upper level low that brought blizzard conditions and ice storm conditions for the upper Midwest, the northern and central plains last week. This system's been hanging out there for quite some time, almost creating something like a blocking pattern, just not necessarily a bona fide blocking pattern, because this is a cutoff entity without any major synoptic scale weather feature to punt it out of our United States area of responsibility. We're going to quickly go through this loop, and you can see moving right along, we finally see it make its fateful exit off the eastern coast, where we get another dose of cold air for the Great Lakes Midwestern region, where we could see some lake effect snowfall, not only for the Midwest, but spanning further to the north into the Northeast. And then out down towards the south, if you look, we have very weak breakaway features of colder air or lower thickness values as those low pressures I'd mentioned at the start of this video continue to transition through the southern tier and eventually up the eastern seaboard. You can see one right there, and then another moving through the desert southwest, and then shortly thereafter that, we get another system moving in, the robust system, that's likely to bring down the extreme push of cold air that we have yet to see this winter season. If I further this loop in time and you look, we are now starting to see different shades of blue with our 528, 522 thickness lines way down into the Great Basin, Intermountain West, which shows you that we are definitely going to have full-fledged, fresh polar air, if not features from the Arctic jet or the northern branch of the jet, beginning to move down and provide us with actual shallow, dense Arctic air for the lower 48, at least in the northwest and western quadrant of the United States. This is going to be the key weather player here, because again, if I go just a little bit further in time, notice how much of a temperature gradient we have over the heart of the United States, from the Midwest, Central Plains, all the way down into the deep south and the desert southwest, where you can see we rapidly transition from the 570 line, which typically is a rule of thumb, is the delineation between our subtropical or maritime tropical air split by that subtropical jet we identified during this El Nino winter time, and our 528 thickness line, which is usually a good reference point for if you want to define where it is your polar front jet lies and where your bona fide polar air mass is down close to ground level. If I go ahead and draw that gradient for you guys, here's our 570 line somewhere floating around in through there, and then here's our 528 line. So I know that doesn't seem like it's very close together looking at just this thickness gradient here, but if you think about it in terms of looking at it from a horizontal perspective, our slope is very sharp, going from 570 decameters is the unit of measure here, down to 528. You can infer that our temperature discontinuity, as we like to refer to on this channel, is very sharp, it's very stark, it's very intense, and this is where we could possibly see some very good severe weather, if not enhanced weather activity, more or less explode along this gradient, because we're also going to have the delineation between our warm, moist, unstable air and our cool, dry air upstream of where this gradient is. Now, moving through time, we're not going to spend too much time on here. As we know, we are in winter time, so we're naturally under a meridional long wave pattern, or in this case, the macro scale overview of North America. You can see our jet is looking all sorts of jacked up, if you want to use, for lack of a better term. We have a ridge moving into the Aleutian Island chain with another aggressive trough making its way towards the east coast at about 6Z on January 2nd. Shortly after the new year, you can see over Conus, we don't really have too much in the way of significant jet energy outside of our El Nino low-latitude subtropical jet still screaming across Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Florida Peninsula, but we aren't anticipating anything substantial just yet. There's a very weak jet finger down over the desert southwest Baja California area. This is going to help to induce the cyclogenesis of that first weak low pressure I'll show you here in a moment. But as you take this further in time, notice how we get a very rapid acceleration of our polar front jet, another stronger jet finger working through the same quadrant of the United States, helping to brew up our next potentially marginal severe weather maker for the south and southeast as we take this through time. And then further down the road, we get another introduction of very, very good jet max activity and a strong acceleration, almost looking like a shared energy region over Mexico and the desert southwest, where we are going to finally see two separate low pressure systems pull in a lot of that very dense cold air from up north in Canada, the western Canadian provinces, and sweep it across the Rocky Mountains into the plains. Alrighty, here we go, and this is what everyone's been waiting for. This is our MSLP-12Z GFS, and you can see we have that bubble of cold air all the way down to a 528 thickness line, which shows that it is cold core barotropic in nature, moving through the eastern half of the U.S. As that makes its exit, you can see another weak pressure system make its way through the Great Lakes, bringing, like I mentioned, a little bit of lake effect snow for the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region. Then eventually it sweeps into the Northeast as we take this further in time. But then there's our first system I'd mentioned to you when we were looking at our jet. Very weak, just looking like some shower activity for the southeast Florida peninsula, and as this continues to make its way through, if you look in the pattern, we have a secondary system that's also bringing in some more cold air. So these systems are actually very pivotal, guys. To take you away from the model for a second, what's happening is every single low pressure that we have go through the pattern, even if they are weak, what that circulation is doing is allowing the gateway for cold air to continue to move further and further to the south. And as these systems continue to plant themselves over the deep southern United States, it's allowing the true manifestation of Arctic, really shallow cold air in Canada to slowly sink its way further south as well. Let me continue. This is our second system, looking a little bit more amped up according to the GFS. The Euro echoes this sentiment as well. And then finally, with that next cold pocket, the third system now expected to make its way through the desert southwest, through the southern plains. It's expected to explode over the Gulf of Mexico, moving towards central Florida and the rest of the southeast. This one here, this is 12 Zulu on January 6th. Looking at this initially, I know this is almost 200 hours into the future. Again, January 6th, well after the holiday season is over and we're into 2024. This weather maker here, I do think we're going to have to watch for a marginal risk for severe with this because, again, looking at our good old thickness lines, we have our 570 line right here, the delineation between our tropical, subtropical air, and then our 546, 540 line up to the north. So we are seeing a little bit of cold air funneling on the backside of this, but that warm air advection is really what I'm paying attention to because we still have our modified maritime polar, continental polar-ish high pressure over the mid-Atlantic region that hasn't gone anywhere for a considerable amount of time. So it is this air mass modification I do think we're going to have to watch for and just how much of a return flow or surge in our leading edge warm air we get, just like we discussed with that previous system that we went storm chasing on here in the channel. We'll have to kind of pay attention to those low-level and mid-level parameters closely. And then finally, last but not least, as I mentioned, if you look up over the northwest, that cold air is poised to come down, and if I just carry this loop all the way through, look at this very, very intense cold plunge. Again, we already identified the thickness lines, and this is what I'm afraid of, is what stark temperature discontinuity right in through here. We could see this very widespread, as I've mentioned in certain social media posts, this multi-regional severe weather event, whether it be severe winter weather event or just severe thunderstorm activity on the leading edge of this very dense punch of cold air as it moves out of the Canadian provinces. Very quickly, we're going to transition through the Euro, guys. I know this video is already long enough. You can see our first system moving through. There goes our second system, and then our third system, as mentioned on the GFS, the possible severe entity moving through the southeast. And then the Euro also agrees we're going to see that cold air funneling that plunge out of Western Canada through the Rockies. As you take this through the tail end of the loop, we have a very strong unstable wave over the central and southern plains that's going to help to further bring down all of those cold conditions. This here we're really going to want to watch for 500 millibar vorticity on the left, 700 millibar vertical velocities on the right, and as you can see with that system, we're going to rapidly accelerate this loop with that third system right here currently parked over Texas. You can already see that our vorticity model and our vertical velocity model are thinking in unison that we could have some very, very good chances at some good convection along the leading edge, depending on our buoyancy, instability, how much warm, moist air we have on the leading edge of this system as it tries to bring cold air in around its backside. Overall, we have the shortwave vorticity for it and the rising air, the rising motion out ahead of it along not only that frontal line, but the area of most temperature discontinuity or that strongest temperature gradient over Florida, moving into Georgia and South Carolina as well. So this is the one I think we're going to have to watch for moving forward. Finally, this is going to be a static shot of what we're expecting over the southeast. And again, just to kind of reinforce the point that I've been making this entire video segment, we have good cold air advection, pretty trademark for this time of year along the backside, the southwest and southern periphery of that circulation centered over Alabama, Mississippi. And then you can see in our 850 millibar winds, we have 50, 60 knots coming out of the south, helping to really bring in some good warm tropical advection out of the Caribbean, out of where it's a little bit more warm in the Gulf of Mexico. We haven't seen our sea surface temps modify too much, unfortunately, so it still looks like we could bring in just enough buoyancy to help kick off some good thunderstorm and shower activity. Alrighty, unfortunately, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the video here. My camera has died on me, a testament to how little I've been making videos on YouTube. I don't even have my camera charged currently, so I do apologize for the brief technical difficulty. But that pretty much wraps up this segment. We have lots to watch as we get ready to push through the new year, but I'm not going to hammer this home too much because, as I mentioned throughout this video, we're still looking maybe between 150 to 200 hours plus into the future, so naturally we're going to see the classic wiggling and wobbling with all of our model platforms. Thank you very much for joining me today, guys. Thank you so much for your continued support, and I really do hope and pray that you guys have had a wonderful holiday season as we get ready to close out the entirety of the calendar 2023 year. I'm very stoked to see what 2024 has in store for us, not only in the weather realm, but in terms of our personal and professional endeavors far and wide. For each and every one of you who join me day to day on this channel, I'm very grateful for your support. I'm very grateful that I've connected to you guys as we've gone through August up to this point. It's been a very humbling and motivating experience. And again, I think fondly of each and every one of you, each and every single individual one of you, not as a collective group, but I know collectively we make this weather community as amazing as we possibly can. So again, guys, thank you very much for watching. We'll meet again soon before the new year, I can promise you that. But until then, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.